Karlo Sy Su with ESPN LA, and I am so glad to be joined by Dr. Alan Beyer of the HOAG Orthopedic Institute. Dr. Beyer, we are 1 month away from, less than 1 month away from the LA Marathon, less than 2 months away from the Boston Marathon, but let's focus on what's going on here in LA. Doc, this is marathon number 3 for me, and speaking for a lot of runners, this is what we call peak week, where we're starting to run 20 miles, our long runs, our long distances to prepare properly for the LA Marathon. Doc, what's your experiences with the LA Marathon or with the marathon or marathon patients?
Well, good to see you. First of all, I hope you've recovered from the Super Bowl. Marathoning is a very unique and interesting sport to me from a physician standpoint. I'm a guy. I've never been a runner. I'm a guy who's always said to patients, if God wanted you to run, he would have given you wheels. Very few people listen to that. Obviously, you will see that in a month. The key about marathons is not the event itself. The event itself is almost a letdown to everything that's gone into your getting ready for the event. You're training for the event. You're getting mentally ready for the event. You're getting physically ready for the event. So as you said, that's if it's not going on already for you and you're planning on running it, I'll see you near the back of the pack. But it's an interesting mentality. The mentality of long distance runners is extremely interesting. They're very unique. That endorphin rush that they get from their running is something that we can't duplicate any other way. You talk to guys who are runners, and they just get that rush, which is greater than any athlete tells you in any other sport. So there must be something there besides just prowling the neighborhoods of LA that draws them there. And I just always hope that the weather's going to cooperate. The weather's the big if. New York has its marathon in the fall. It's pretty easy to predict that the weather in October will be okay. For us, the weather at the end of March is usually okay, but it can rain. It can be very cold. Ideally, I like to see temperatures in the 50s for a marathon. I think that's best for the runners. If it gets into the 70s, that doesn't sound hot to us day to day. We're used to that. We love that here in LA, but not if you're running a marathon. The key is keeping your body cool, keeping hydrated. You gotta keep hydrated. You've got to be built up to that distance. You're going to hit a wall at about what 19 miles or so is when you hit the wall, right? You got to be ready for that. And if push comes to shove and you feel you can't go on, walk a little while. It's not like you're the professional who's looking to get a gold medal in the Olympics. So you just got to prepare. The name of the game is preparation, from the way you eat the week leading up to it, and just prepare yourself for maximal energy and things that are going to be processed easily by your body. I don't know how many porta potties there are around LA when they have the marathon. I'm sure there are plenty. But I think the key is preparation. The key is definitely preparation. And of all the places that have a marathon, this is probably the place that geographically is best suited for it.
Course wise, when we're starting from Dodger Stadium and run into the Santa Monica shore, there's a lot of hills on the way. So, yes, like you mentioned, the terrain, seeing the Los Angeles sunshine, hopefully, like you mentioned, the weather is great. Uh, you mentioned 50 degrees and 70 degrees. I remember there was an LA Marathon a few years ago where there were a lot of runners that were complaining about overheating, and that's why they had to actually push it earlier. Doc, when it comes to hydration, what tips would you give more in detail? Because honestly, for me, hydration and even nutrition is starting to become an issue. I don't know when to consistently keep myself hydrated when all I can focus is just keep on running.
Well, fortunately, you've got volunteers all along the way who are holding out drinking cups, but that's usually just water. And it's not just water that you want to have as part of your hydration program. You really want something with some electrolytes and the other things that you sweat off, which water itself does not contain. With lack of any absent anything else, water's okay, but that's not your ideal. And I think part of it's having yourself hydrated going into the event, the morning of. And that's not just gulping down a gallon of water when you leave the house to go to the event. I mean, you can get your body a little bit, over peaked in terms of how much fluid you're carrying, because you're going to lose that fluid over that 26.2 miles. So you want to prepare for that. I also tell people, especially as they get a little bit older, throw a couple of energy bars into your pocket and maybe munch them during the game. You see golfers do that during an 18-hole golf tournament, right? You'll see them reach into their bag, and some things like an orange or a banana, things like that, are a little awkward to carry. But a protein bar or an energy bar will fit very easily into your pocket. They're kind of small. And I think that being prepared with something like that for a little calorie boost is very reasonable also. But not everybody thinks that way. Like you said, they're just focused on keep your head up, look ahead. The finish line is 3 steps closer, right? You could pack the energy bar. I think it's a good idea.
One foot in front of another. Doc, we got to be totally transparent here. And come on, this is the road to recovery. So we talk about anything and everything on this show. So when it comes to eating and keeping food handy for your nutrition while you're running, that's one of the things I and a lot of other runners are scared about. The runner's runs and avoiding those filthy porta potties that are along the path and desperately looking for one when all you got to do is run. Is there any piece of advice that you have when it comes to trying to make sure your digestive system can cooperate?
Well, I don't think that it's wise to, like a week before, start preparing your colon or something like that by trying to clean it out, and so you're not going to have to go during the game. I mean, during the race. I think that you can control that somewhat in terms of what you eat. You want to eat a lot of low residue stuff the night before. You probably want to eat a bit of a high carb load to give yourself the energy in the carbs, and maybe lay off the less easily digested things like the salads and the cellulose laden things that have a slower transit time, and don't move through the GI system as quickly. And there are plenty of guides on how to do that. I think that sticking that 12 hours before to easily digestible high carb load is probably the best way to go.
I will keep that in mind, Doc. Thank you very much for those tips. You talk about also injury prevention and how it's important to respect the training that goes into race day and how anticlimactic race day can be. You hear stories about people who just all of a sudden will decide, hey, I'm going to run the LA Marathon. Once in a while, you'll hear these rare stories. And I can't help but to be jealous because they didn't have to do the torturous training routine that a lot of us runners do. But, Doc, what have you seen, especially in these final weeks leading up to the actual race day? How important is it to maintain your routine, maintain your training, and does that help prevent injuries?
Absolutely. Training up to a marathon by slowly dialing up your distances, slowly cutting down your split times, definitely helps your chances of success and your ability to complete without injury. The one thing that I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention it is shoes. Shoes are so important to the runner. I think serious runners realize that people who put a lot of miles on their feet, that a good pair of running shoes probably only lasts them 6 months to a year. So I think that getting into a pair of shoes, not the night before. Don't wear a new pair of shoes for the race. I would wear a pair of shoes that you've broken inappropriately, that's probably about a month old. So they still have really good cushioning, and your foot has adapted to the shoe, and the shoe has adapted its shape to your foot a little bit. Invest in good shoes. Don't just go out there and run in flip flops or just a pair of rainbows or something like that. I mean, serious runners know this. I'm talking more to the people who don't run a lot of marathons. But think ahead on the shoes. I mean, really, really get yourself well fitted at a shoe store where they know what they're doing. There's certainly plenty of specialized running shoe stores around. If you're going to take it seriously, get fitted for a good pair of shoes, but don't wait till the last minute to do it. Get them 4 to 6 weeks before, so they're well broken in, yet they're still new enough that they're going to give you the appropriate level of shock absorption, comfort, and everything else that you need. That's the one thing that people tend to neglect a little bit, and it's hard to believe it, but they do.
This is perfect timing for our fans. We are less than a month out. Get your shoes if you need to now. Now's
Now
the
is the
time.
time to get those shoes. Exactly right.
Now, looking ahead to race day, and of course, my mind can't help but to look ahead to being able to cross that finish line. Doc, what would be your biggest tips in recovering from running a marathon? Obviously, this is our road to recovery after that 26.2. Do we just stop, or how can we make sure our body recovers well from the torture of 26.2 miles?
I think that, well, just look at it this way. If you were doing a triathlon, you would have also done a bike ride and a couple of miles of swimming. I think that you don't just immediately stop and get in the car and go home. I mean, you want to cool off. You want your body to cool down a little bit, walk it off. Um, I think that if you're prone to things like shin splints and stuff like that from running activities, you want to stretch some after you finish, maybe ice down a little bit after you finished. Walk it off some, eat something light. Don't go right to a heavy meal right afterwards. I probably wouldn't chug down a couple of beers right afterwards either, as much as you might feel like your body needs them. I'd wait a little while for that. Just use your common sense. And I think that the name of the game is just let your body adapt to what you just did. Congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back. You owe yourself a congratulations. Um, but just don't try to go back to life and your usual day to day thing. Give your body a day or two to adjust.
Doc, thanks for those tips. I'll definitely be thinking about you and your advice when I cross the finish line and other runners cross the finish line. And speaking of the finish line, Doc, we got to pay off what we talked about last week during the Super Bowl, the finish line of the NFL season. How successful was your Super Bowl night?
Well, I'm on the record as saying that I was going with Patrick and Andy Reid. And I think that realistically, what became borne out to me at the end of the game was that Andy Reid right now is the best coach in football. He had his team prepared for overtime. There's only been one other overtime game in Super Bowl history. He spent hours with his team the week before talking through what they were going to do. Are we going to take the ball or are we going to pass if we win the coin toss for overtime? Because the rules were different than they were a few years ago. Both teams are guaranteed to touch the ball with the new rules, not like in the New England Atlanta game years ago where Tom Brady won the toss, marched down the field, 6 points. Atlanta never got to touch the ball and lost the game. And oh, by the way, the offensive coordinator of that Atlanta Falcons team was none other than Kyle Shanahan. Okay, just saying. So I think that the Chiefs were much better prepared. Even some of the San Francisco players admitted that they didn't know the new overtime rules. They had never talked about overtime. The Chiefs were going to defer on the coin toss if they won it, and then try to score a touchdown when they got the ball and go for two. They were going to win the game on the 2 point conversion if they had to do that when they had the second possession in the overtime period. So they gave it a lot of thought. They planned it. They had strategy. I think you really saw it when there was about a minute left in that overtime period. And Mahomes looked like he was taking his time. He wasn't hurried. He wasn't rushing. Oh, there's only a minute left. 2 minute drill. Gotta go. Gotta go. No, because he knew that if the clock ran out, they're going to start another quarter. We still have the ball. It's the same drive. They knew that. They were prepared for it. They game planned it and they executed. I think it was a really, I love looking at those little behind the scenes tidbits about why it happened. Now, second Super Bowl overtime in history, and Kyle Shanahan has lost both of them.
Dr. Beyer, you kind of allude to it. I couldn't help but to watch those audio clips of Mahomes and the Chiefs sideline, literally having everything choreographed to the play and knowing what was going to happen. And then their reaction, their raw reaction to the Niners accepting the ball and going for the first play
Yeah,
in overtime.
the Niners did what we all have been taught to do in overtime, which is take the ball, take the ball, take the ball. The new rules do not support that decision, and they clearly weren't well schooled on it.
Doc, you're taking a page from the legendary coach John Wooden. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail, and you use that as points of emphasis for both preparing to run a marathon and preparing to win a Super Bowl.
Well, winning in any sport has a lot of similarities, and I think that they're consistent. And whether it's John Wooden in basketball, or running a marathon, or playing football, winners are winners, and the winners who are the most prepared are the ones who stand on the top of the podium.
We're all winners this week after chatting with you, Dr. Beyer. Thank you very much for your time this week. Looking ahead to next week.
Well, looking ahead to a month of spring training, too. No doctor in the dugout for anybody to listen to for the next 5 weeks. I'm preempted by spring training games, which all start at 12 noon. But that's okay. We'll be back. And we've got a lot to watch. Shohei is looking like a beast in some of the things that I've seen so far. He's hitting the ball already, but he's not going to be in the opening game of spring training. I bet you that he plays, though, when the Dodgers play the Angels right before the regular season starts.
Can't wait to talk more about him, Doc.
Well, we
Appreciate your
will.
time, Doc.
Okay, thanks. Be well.